thinking about the ultimate outcome, like what is our North Star that's guiding us? What do we really want? What is the ultimate goal? And thinking about imagining that goal of teaching, maybe to be the learner experience versus a particular score or an outcome, experiences of love, joy, rigor, freedom. What is the quality of the learning experience, or the quality of teaching? Like, why are we really teaching?
Hello and welcome to the Digital Education Podcast. Today's episode is about building educators' capacity for digital learning environment. The podcast is brought to you by the Digital School, where we unpack the evolving world of education and technology. My name is Waleed Al Ali, and with me in moderating this podcast is Professor Dede from Harvard Graduate School of Education. In this episode, we are delving into a critical issue that's shaping the future of education globally, building educators' capacity for digital learning environments. I may start with some background or some statistics from the UNESCO Global Report on Teachers. The report brings to light some really alarming findings. By 2030, the world needs an additional 44 million primary and secondary teachers. This staggering number includes a pressing demand for 7 out of 10 teachers at the secondary level, and the need to replace more than half of the existing teachers leaving the profession. Sub-Saharan Africa is especially affected by this, as it requires 15 million new teachers to meet this demand. This crisis spans not only in developing nations, but also reaches into high-income areas like Europe and North America, where despite all well-resourced systems, there are significant struggles to recruit and to retain qualified educators. Today, we'll explore the implications of this global teachers shortage, understand its implications on education infrastructure, and discuss how technology and digital environments can be part of the solution. With us today, two special guests, McGrath and Rhonda Bondie, and we can start maybe by, if you allow me to, if you can start introducing yourself in 3 minutes and tell us more about yourself before we start the first question in this day.
As Dr. Waleed said, my name is Amy McGrath, and I'm a vice president for Arizona State University and also the managing director of ASU Preparatory Academies, which is a network of schools and innovations on the K-12 side of the efforts that Arizona State University has to serve students across the entire learning spectrum. We say from pre-K through gray. And the effort for us is to ensure that all of the innovations that Arizona State University has to offer can be deployed in a relevant manner to students, to adults, really to any curious human that's looking to skill and be prepared for the future workforce, which is a unique dynamic given that most universities are centered around only degree-seeking learners, and we are a much more egalitarian enterprise, making learning accessible to all students and all learners across the spectrum. So great to be here, Dr. Waleed, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Rhonda?
Hi, I'm Rhonda Bondie, and I am an associate professor in special education at Hunter College, which is part of the City University system here in New York City. I recently moved back to New York City after working with Dede at Harvard on a project called Reach Every Reader, where we examine building educator capacity through new digital technologies. And I have the great honor of having traveled all around the world. I started my career in New York City, public schools in the Bronx in the 1980s. And then I wrote a book called Differentiated Instruction Made Practical, which was picked up by teachers in more than 30 countries. And so I've had this wonderful opportunity to look at public schools, private schools all around the world, and the challenges that teachers encounter when they engage in trying to make sure that all learners are learning every day. So I'm really excited to be here.
Rhonda, I was a big fan of your book, and our teachers have read it too. So it's fun to be on a panel with you.
Thank you. It's now translated into Arabic and Portuguese, and it's just it's taken off, which I think has been really interesting, because what is it that is culturally specific in our context that's unique to our teaching? And what are some of the core things that support teachers in human interactions and learning that take place wherever humans are learning together?
Well, I've been very excited about this episode, knowing Rhonda well and admiring Amy's work, and being an advisor to the digital school and the many things that they do that involve teachers. And of course, I've spent my entire career in schools of education, and so teacher capacity building has been a theme for me over the decades. And I wanted to begin by asking, building teacher capacity is multidimensional. There's so many forms of capacity that a teacher needs to be effective. And as you think about this particular challenge that Dr. Waleed outlined, of just needing teachers, because so many children are in huge classes or no classes, what forms of teacher capacity come to your mind? What advice would you give people who are trying to address this problem about, okay, of the 20 important things about being a teacher, here's the 3 or 4 to start with?
I'll tackle that, and then I'll pass it to Amy. I think that we often focus on knowledge, curriculum, strategies, things that we think we can give to teachers. Let me teach you how to do this, and then you can hold it and use it. And I think the 3 most important areas that are almost never addressed in professional development are, number 1, the ability to observe and listen. Teacher perception is everything. We can only respond to the things that we notice. And we don't spend enough time with teachers building their capacity and the disposition and the skills for listening and slow looking and observing before jumping to an evaluation or a judgment. The second thing that we spend very little time on is critical thinking for teachers. We spend a lot of time on creative and critical thinking for students, but we don't spend a lot of time nurturing that in teachers and helping them identify the strategies and the skills that they can use to engage in critical thinking on their feet while learning is unfolding, which is an essential teacher capacity. Being dynamic in your thinking, flexible, and extremely purposeful and disciplined. Really disciplining your thinking to follow a strategy is something that needs to be identified, practiced many times, and that's often neglected. And the final area that I think is essential is self-awareness and self-understanding. Being able to take a moment to monitor yourself and to understand the knowledge that you're bringing, the biases, the experiences that you're using to make meaning and to make understanding in the classroom. Teachers are the main source of meaning making in the classroom, and it's important to constantly be aware as you're constantly changing, as you're learning and experiencing yourself throughout your teaching career, what you're bringing to the classroom and the frames and tools that you're using to understand and to make meaning of the experiences unfolding before you is in constant motion. It's dynamic throughout your career. So being able to monitor that is extremely important. So those are my 3 big areas for teacher capacity: perception or listening and observing, thinking, critical and creative, and self-awareness.
I love that, Rhonda. It's perfect that you went first. I think just building upon that, when I read the UNESCO 2024 report, it does recommend a holistic approach, and you kind of covered that. It's very three-dimensional, Chris, as you noted. And I think about it in the same way that we think about personalized learning, and what that looks like at scale is you have to have multiple pathways. You have to care about the student holistically from their social emotional intelligence, and you have to care for a teacher in the same way and create a interdependence within a training so that you have an environment where both the facilitator but also those in the dynamic trainings are able to offer feedback and role play and have the opportunity to, just as you said, Rhonda, think on their feet. So I really do appreciate that so much. It's so much more than just the content. And the body of content is growing so rapidly that teachers need to be prepared for. And so it's more about the agility and the EQ that can be built within the teachers to be able to manage through that, even when we release our teachers and they've got the most stacked credentials. Some of our language system that we use for our expert teachers tracks, they're still not going to be ready, just in the same way that I never will be. If I think I am, then I'm probably thinking the wrong way. It's this growth mindset. And so having the ability to your disposition as a lifelong learner, as a lead learner, is huge. And it's something that we try to create as a foundation in how the teacher views themselves, so that they can be able to expose students to more as well, and kind of grow them as humans, not just in one specific content area.
I'm certainly resonating to what both of you are saying. And it's also reminding me, especially the self-awareness, about the challenging conditions that teachers can work under across the world, especially if they're in rural areas or dealing with groups that are historically marginalized or facing some other kind of really bad infrastructure situation. Dr. Waleed, can you talk a little about the kinds of challenges that you see teachers facing at different digital school sites?
Well, yes, I think, like you mentioned, all teachers face challenges and face difficulties, within their context and within their, environment and culture. But I think within the marginalized, or at least within the areas that we've worked with, they had specifically challenges, starting from the lack of infrastructure and limited availability of infrastructure and tools. But beyond that, limited capacity building programs, limited motivation sometimes for educators, with all the complexities that might be, tripled or quadrupled compared to other educators. They still, you can see in their eyes, hope to, help and train. And, the moment we started to provide them their training, they've been so eager to continue this training. They've been so proud that they continue their training. So uh, definitely they have a lot of challenges, but at the same time, they have a lot of aspirations and a lot of belief about the role of education and their role as educators. I think what Rhonda mentioned is, in terms of, how teachers can be critical thinkers themselves, how they can be self-aware and understanding. All these are important elements for a well-rounded leader. And we need leaders in schools and in classrooms. And with some support in terms of skilling or capacity building for those educators, they will be able to do much more than what they've been usually able to do.
I'm struck also, Rhonda and Amy, by this idea of the teacher as a diagnostician, that you're really, based on a very small amount of time and interaction, needing to make some decisions about a particular child's needs. And Again, that's not necessarily something that's typically thought of as part of teacher professional development. And Rhonda, I'm sure your background as a special educator was helpful in this, but I wonder for teachers who don't have that background, how you help them to develop a diagnostic sense. Are there things that they can look for that really give clues as to what they should be doing?
Yes, and I want to actually connect to that last question too about resources, because I think these two ideas are connected. And I think my advice would be to set ambitious but practical goals. And so how that works is if you're teaching an environment where you need more resources, I always just identify what I actually do have and begin working there, because that's solid and I can do it and move forward. The same works when you're diagnosing students. The thing that you always have is student responses and student work. You don't need a fancy assessment necessarily. Those two things tell you where a student is currently, and then they can monitor student growth if collected over time. So student responses and student work, and then making explicit to the student and to yourself the criteria that you're looking for in that student work to demonstrate quality of understanding, quality of thinking, quality of connections to yourself, whatever it is that you're looking for in that piece of work, making those criteria visible. Those two things require no resources really at all. The student response or work and the criteria that you've identified either collaboratively with the student or yourself. And then connecting that over time is probably the best way to monitor student growth. And then what I like to do with students is, here in New York City, they call it radical honesty. I'll always tell a student exactly where they currently are. And I work a lot in the international high schools here in New York, where students are new to the United States, they're new to English. And so, they could easily be in a ninth grade or at the beginning of high school level and just learning to read in English, many years behind where the expectation might be for the United States. And the teachers sometimes hide that information from students. They're concerned about their self-esteem and they feel like, I don't do that at all. I tell the student exactly where you are and exactly about the growth that would be expected in a year. A student will always say, I want to read at a ninth grade level here in the US when they read currently at a second grade level. Well, that's setting yourself up for a goal that's going to be very disappointing at the end of the year. It's unlikely you're going to advance 7 years worth of reading in a single year, but you probably could do 2. So I set out with a very clear goal, and 2 years worth of reading would look like what? What would we see in the student work? So we're very clear the goal that we would see in our work and our response. And then I back out, okay, 6 months from now, what would we anticipate our work looking like? 3 months from now, next week, we could see what change in the work. And we sort of plan out the year together with some benchmarks that I've created myself with the student based on what we're going to see different in their work, which could be the strategy they're using, it could be the outcome of correct problems, it could be their attendance, it could be a wide range of goals. But in setting that out for each individual student, and it's not so much work to have each student have different goals because everybody's monitoring the student work, so they're basically all doing the same thing. I can do this in very large class sizes, up to 50 students I've done. So I think rooting everything in the student work gives students so much agency that they're not dependent on the teacher. How am I doing? Am I doing well? Am I progressing? They can see for themselves. And then they can seek help from the teacher and how they could change their own actions to get greater growth. So that would be my advice.
I would just add on, certainly from an engagement perspective, I think making the students feel seen and teaching teachers how to do that in an online environment it's a tricky work. So, creating these safe environments where students can speak up using various strategies that allow us to make, human connection, empathetic connection with the students when you're in a Zoom classroom, for instance, you're looking through a different lens than when you're making your way around a brick and mortar classroom. And so engagement is key to the student's success. When a kid is completely zoned out, it's difficult to know anything that's going on. So, a lot of the emotional support and creating this safe environment for students is pretty key in what we're trying to teach our educators to do, so that they can also create an environment where the teachers are then able to have one-on-one conversations for discussion-based assessments and connections with the family. And those are the types of strategies that can happen offline out of synchronous training that then allow the teacher to have more depth as they go into larger synchronous trainings with multiple students.
Dr. Waleed, my sense is that in the digital school sites, there's really not much issue with student motivation, because these are students who are getting access for the first time, many of them, to something that's very precious. And they do, as Rhonda says, have to set realistic goals. But in my interactions with you and your staff, my sense is that these are students that will work very, very hard to attain what you're asking of them.
I think, from day one, when we started to define what is digital school and, how we are going to go about digital school, the term digital school might be sometimes misleading, and people automatically assume everything is online and we don't need teachers. And when we started to put the building blocks, and teachers are critical for digital education for marginalized communities, and people start to ask, but why? And we said, because everything is around teachers. You start with teachers, they will connect you to students, they will connect you to parents, they will connect you to the community. And this is why it was central for us to build and invest heavily in the professional development program and in the teachers' capacity building, which we've seen the results of it. I mean, we work closely with AMI and the team at ASU in terms of how we drive this program across different cultures, across different countries. It's offered now in 4 languages, and a 5th language is in the pipeline. I think taking from what was discussed just now by Rhonda and Ami, which you kind of explained how to be an effective teacher, to how we can, characterize effective capacity building for teachers, because everybody think, you want to build capacity for teachers, just enroll them into trainings, and then they finish X hours of training, done, we did capacity building. So how would you look at, capacity building for teachers? And the following question will be, if we do that, then how we can do that at scale, which is, serving the opening of this episode.
Well, I can jump in certainly on leveraging, obviously, the emergent technology. And what we're working with right now is seeing how AI is going to help us move into some of the, I guess, strategy zone for some of the scale barriers. Certainly, and Dr. Waleed, as you noted, some of the content and the pedagogy that Arizona State University is building for the digital school that will be accelerated based on the AI's ability to translate and do some quality checking on the content, et cetera, But I'm also very interested to see in some of the recent releases of 4.0 for GPT, what we might be able to do from a bot training relationship. So, some of the role playing, some of the holistic aspects that we had discussed earlier in the episode, can some of that be done offline? And so, we're entering into uncharted waters. And so I think it's important for us to challenge one another, to press into the available technology that we can deploy to our teachers as we're trying to build capacity, because the problem set that we hit on at the very beginning, 44 million teachers by 2030, we need more than what we have to build that capacity. So I'll just, throw in my vote that even though it is scary, and I am a huge proponent of human connection, we need to be very, I think, open to designing models around artificial intelligence enhancements to be force multipliers to be able to solve for our educator capacity pipeline problem that we're seeing coming fast and furious.
And to that end, there's an online tool called Teaching with Grace, which is an AI-powered virtual classroom for teaching practice that Chris and Bill Furster from Stage Tools and I built during the Reach Every Reader grant, and we've continued to pursue it through other grants. It's, not everything. We're using open source, totally free technology, and just focused on very discrete teaching skills of how teachers can use strategies to make meaning in the classroom, which I think is probably one of the most important critical skills in teaching, is how do teachers interact with students to both understand a student response and then prompt the student to create meaning from their thinking, not just knowing a fact, but meaning. How is the fact meaningful? How is the learning meaningful to the student? And so I've been exploring it here with novice teachers and experienced teachers. And I think the great thing about it is you can slow down human interaction with AI. So whether or not AI characterizes the teacher's language perfectly, and unfortunately, we only have it working in English at the moment, but if the AI rates the type of teacher response incorrectly, I think that leads to teacher reflection and conversation. I thought that I was really prompting student thinking, but the AI said I was clarifying student thinking. What's the difference between a teacher response that clarifies or that prompts strategic thinking? So even when it's wrong, it seems to be really useful. And because you're responding to an avatar student in a virtual classroom versus a real classroom where human interaction is expected to take place at a certain pace, teachers can really think and practice the language that they want to use in the classroom, not the language that just comes out. So it's kind of like if you think about learning to play the piano, for example, or a sport or something, when you're doing an approximated practice, for the piano, you want to practice every note perfectly. You don't want to practice mistakes. You want to slow down and practice so that you can really feel what it's like to try on this new strategy or this stretch in your skills. And we never really provide that opportunity for teachers. Practice always takes place in role play with other teachers in a time-driven situation after school or workshop, or it takes place with real teaching with students. Even if you're being supervised by a mentor teacher, all of the interactions are taking place in real time. So I think AI and emergent technologies offer this incredible opportunity to slow down time for teachers to erase and to try again, for teachers to fast forward. So they're only working on the parts of a lesson that are challenging. They don't have to do all the beginning part that you would have to do with a normal in a class with a student to catch them up to the hard part. You can just start at the hard part and practice. How do I prompt students at the most challenging part of this lesson and work that over and over and over? So I mean, there's just profound impacts for teacher education with AI technologies. Also, I'm finding teachers get so curious. They want to get under the hood. Like, what does this software look like? Like, what's making it work? What is a large language model? Hey, whose language is being used here? Hey, whose value is being put to this language? And the teachers bring a critical approach and a curious approach to the technology as well. So I think you get a twofer. You get teachers really developing their understanding of this changing dynamic world, and the technology and how technology is driving those changes, as well as this very new and different way to develop teacher skills that we traditionally have never developed strategically before. So I think it's a super exciting time. I also made an online game for teachers to practice collaboration, because that's another thing that we're going to need to do, especially as teacher shortages happen. We're going to need to work more together and build upon each other's work. So I think providing simulated opportunities for teachers to practice collaboration, which is also really negotiated and navigated among the teachers, often without any support at all, is an incredible opportunity that game-like environments provide for us. So I'm really excited about the future of teacher education. I think teacher education hasn't changed much in centuries, and AI is really providing this opportunity for us to really reimagine how teachers are prepared.
Before we segue from that question, I think beyond emergent technology and leveraging that to be a vehicle to scale, I think it's important to also address perceptions about the teaching field and how we, as we're preparing educators for the field, need to think differently about what that looks like. So I think about some of our listeners here that might be in the communication side of their of the school and organization house. And I think we need some great communication campaigns just around, and this may be a greater problem in the US, because I know teaching can be honored as a vocation in different ways in other countries, but certainly in the United States, just watching some of the campaigns that we're facing, those who can't teach. There are some pretty terrible things that we have to address within a US stigma that's coming at the very same time as a lot of this emergent technology, where teachers feel both undervalued and scared that their jobs are at risk. And so it's super important, I think, from opportunities for us to create a communication campaign nationally and internationally about the importance of the human, of the teacher, and what they have to offer in terms of generationally changing the trajectory of the students that they have impact on. And part of another way that we're thinking about this at ASU is the teaching role being shifted, and thinking about the composition of your teaching staff at a school in much different ways, so that you may not just have one content expert for math that's responsible for 200 students. Think differently about the access you have to the talent in your community. Our Teachers College, the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College, has an initiative called the Next Education Workforce, where roles are distributed and people are brought in, almost like a medical field, where you have multiple counts of just engagement with adults that may have general supervisory responsibilities, that have very specific roles that they may be excellent at lecturing, or they may be more of a data analyst. And so changing the way that we generally prepare teachers for the field, and stimulating some excitement into what they may be able to do around instructional design or some of the other features of the field, I think are also ways, hopefully, that that we can kind of bust through some of these barriers.
I'm going to build on that just for a moment. I think that's brilliant. And in addition to our beliefs and the ways that teachers work, really thinking about that, thinking about the ultimate outcome, like what is our North Star that's guiding us? What do we really want? What is the ultimate goal? And thinking about imagining that goal of teaching, maybe to be the learner experience versus a particular score or an outcome, experiences of love, joy, rigor, freedom. What is the quality of the learning experience, or the quality of teaching? Like, why are we really teaching? And what is the outcome? And I think that would help us to retain teachers and provide guidance for where we're trying to go.
And I'm sitting here just resonating with everything that you're saying, and also from a digital perspective, the whole history of educational technology, and for me that goes back more than half a century, is using ed tech to do the same thing faster and cheaper, rather than using ed tech to do a different new thing that's actually better, doing better things rather than doing things better. And what you're discussing in terms of differentiated staffing in education, the opportunity for guided practice without having to have a mentor constantly around, these are potentially breakthroughs in terms of scale, because it opens up a bigger teacher pool. If you don't all have to be wonderful at interacting with students, it opens up the opportunity to learn without necessarily having to have a skilled human being around to guide you every second of that learning experience. And it gives me a sense of hope. But it is difficult to get those innovations adopted in conventional teacher practice, as I'm sure both of you are well aware. And what's excited to me about the digital school is that there's no prior model that says, no, you can't do that. We already have this way of doing that. That's off limits. And it's a sandbox that opens up very powerful opportunities. Am I mischaracterizing that, Dr. Waleed, or does that sound right?
I think, I really enjoyed the discussion just now, because for some reason I was assuming, there will be reluctance toward, okay, how technology can help educators, because all discussions are generic, AI can help us in our life. And the discussion that we just had, Amy and Rhonda, you mentioned specific areas and how AI can help educators practice more better, or practice more, or focus on a specific set of skills. At the digital school, our board chairman is Minister of AI, so you can see how much AI is enforced. But at the same time, there is a lot of cautions on terms of traditional teaching and how people will accept it. We've been challenged always, because when in marginalized context, and this is the question that I was going to ask, the context of marginalized, mostly we don't have teachers who are trained as teachers. It will be, they call it education facilitators. It will be a parent, a mother from the community who barely can read and write, and he or she are assisting with education, best effort. And it's difficult for you to just engage them in a traditional training program. But we were very happy with the results that we had with the training program, or the professional development program that we built with ASU, because we've seen how normal, remote villages, mothers who are education facilitators evolved. And I can give you an example where one of the villages in South Egypt, where the first week we've been telling them, we did the training face to face. This is the first ever time we did the training. We said, let's do it face to face. We know we have it online, self-paced, but we want to do it right. And my team was telling me, we asked them, please share your emails. And they were saying, what is email? I'm like, oh, we need to do level 0. I mean, we need to do level 0. We thought level 1 is there. But after less than a year, I visited one of these villages. And I remember that clearly when one of the education facilitators was coming to us, I have a request. And I told her, sure. And she was showing me the learning management system and telling me, you need to enhance these features on the learning management system. This will allow us to better interact between each other. And also, if you can put something that will allow us to communicate as a community between other schools, this will allow us to do better and better. And I'm like, wow, actually we disabled some of these features, so we don't give them so much features. And you can see how far they are progressing. I think right now they are waiting for us. We are waiting for level 3. Let's start, which shows us the needs and the challenges for educators within marginalized contexts are far different than the needs or the challenges that are within traditional contexts. At the same time, this is why we've been investigating between our teams, and I was discussing with Chris how we can really drive AI and utilize AI to help educators within marginalized context, because they lack educators, they lack certain areas that are available to other educators, and AI can play a huge role in them practicing and them utilizing AI to help them better engage with the students, compared to AI for education directly go to students. So this is also an important area that we really saw, and now we are working hard with the team to build the model of how we will really capitalize on those community of educators across 14 countries, across 4 or 5 languages, and how they can collectively really help each other at the start. But at the end, the aim is to help students. If I bring the best, maybe one of the best teachers from the city, and take him or her to the village, I'm sure they will struggle to engage and to communicate the traditional way. They've been looking into that. It's the same applies to if I bring the best AI for educators and try to say you use it in your context.
Dr. Waleed, I so appreciate what you're saying. One of the things that from a design perspective, as we're model building, what we build and its community context is so important when we talk about the readiness for emergent technology, and specifically with the mission that the digital school has to serve marginalized populations. The careful design on not being too sophisticated to where there's zero adoption, and really creating a lot of emphasis on the UX so that it's easy and it doesn't feel so overwhelming, because I think you really lose a lot of teachers and then of course your students, because it becomes you saturate it with buzzwords and with too many it's intimidating, it's scary. So I just so appreciate that, because sometimes when we're working with really progressive school leaders, we get the chance to deploy some of our most sophisticated technologies, and it's great. That's actually a very smaller population. We do a lot of work in design and simplifying what the feature set is so that it's not so cumbersome and clunky, because it does take quite a bit on the adult side. And the best part about it, you kind of spoke a little bit to this, Dr. Waleed, but using AI as more of a co-pilot in the ability to facilitate, problem-based learning, et cetera, and doing that as, creating master trainers to be able to model that before it's actually released more to our general populations. I think that, some really important scaffolding that we need to do for our own educators before we have this huge expectation to deploy AI ambiguously across all of our different countries that we're serving.
One of the themes that we introduce into episodes is asking our guests, what do you think may happen in the next 5 years from an optimistic perspective? If the world had a really good 5 years in terms of building teacher capacity for marginalized students, maybe good because the technology advances, maybe good because people finally take the UN sustainability goals seriously, whatever the reason would be. I'd love to hear, any sort of aspirational visions that you have of what, if things went right, what might be possible within 5 years or so.
I can start. Speaking first to policymakers, I think there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done, and again, different from country to country, just around access. So both the levers that need to be unlocked through creative policy making to have devices and connectivity deployed to some of our most difficult to reach locations and geographies. We need government help there. I also think the salary increases can also be helped from a government perspective to be able to incent our teaching profession to retain. With loan forgiveness, scholarships, there's all sorts of things from a mechanics perspective, the architecture of how we incent and motivate our educators to come to the field and to stay. I think there's, what the future should look like, I think is in the hands often of many of our policymakers that could make some really huge strides for us as the designers, for Rhonda and I as the designers of what it looks like on an implementation perspective as operators to be able to deploy the best models. And what I see in the future and what gets me very, very excited is a rejuvenated field of educators. And I say teachers a little less now because I think how we educate is going to look so different in the future. But there's opportunity for teacher advancement, educator advancement programs to continue to desire to credential. The access to very high quality teacher preparation is, I think, through vehicles like the digital school is going to be available to millions of educators, and the user experience will be one that that kind of brings joy back to the field. It gives the teaching profession respect and honor, and I think it also will create this ability for the educators to passionately want to instill in their students how to be prepared, and because there's so many new skills that they're going to need to be prepared for the future workforce. So it's this very virtuous cycle. The architecture of how this can thrive, I think there's quite a bit of policy work that needs to be done. But even inside of that, I know that that's the work that I'm sure Rhonda is as well, but for the last 20 years have been transcending policy to be able to do creative things. So we have the grit and we will be able to do that without any policy changes, but I think it would make it quite easier to sprint for us to be able to make the type of learning environments that we'd like and have the talent coming to us that we need to be able to solve these big, thick problems.
Well, I support everything Amy said. And I think the biggest barrier to progress in teaching and learning is deep down, there isn't a common shared belief in the rich interior intellectual life of each and every human being. So somewhere in our belief systems, we have this notion that not everyone can learn. And it plays out in our policies, it plays out in our practices, it plays out in the distribution of resources, and ultimately it plays out in discrete interactions, human interactions between teachers and students, and peers between students among themselves in the classroom, creating historically marginalized communities and students. So I think, I don't know if 5 years is enough time, but in the next 5 years, what I would like to see is ubiquitously a belief in the rich interior intellectual life of each and every human being, believing that everyone, each individual can learn and has great capacity to learn, whether they're teachers, learners, anywhere in their lifetime. And so that would be the thing that I would look for in the next 5 years. And I think ultimately to achieve any of our goals in teaching and learning, that belief has to be present.
Very interesting, because I'll follow from what Rhonda said. I've been always past period thinking about the role of teachers and the need for teachers and the crisis that we have toward access to teachers. The traditional thinking of the crisis of education, because 250 or 270 million students need to access education, and that we need to sort and address this through traditional schooling, building schools, printing books, bringing teachers, is flawed, because you don't have teachers. You need 70 million teachers to address that at least, and 44 million for Africa. So I've been always thinking about the notion of how do we prepare teachers, and who are the teachers, and can we really capitalize on the development in technology, the development of teachers, capacity building, and training, to really have an initiative that will allow anyone who is able to read and write and have the basic capabilities to be able to go through a specific training guided by AI, guided by technology, to be an educator. And once he starts his career as educator, he will be receiving the right guidance from the community through the technology to really drive teaching in his community, in his neighborhood. And policies would really accept those educators, hire them, recognize them. Otherwise, if we continue with the traditional teaching, because they need to take a college degree, they need to, with all the respect to all of this, you won't address this crisis. It's crisis, so it requires innovative ways to have more educators, recognize them, and really train them and prepare them to really teach within their inner circle and grow as they go through the different means of capacity building that are available globally. What we did in the digital school, for us, it's a clear example that teachers, even if they are not college graduates, they are willing to learn, they are willing to develop, they really appreciate providing training to them, and they really celebrate it. We've seen them having huge celebration in the village because this teacher received a certificate from Arizona State University. And it reflects on the students, because the students said, I want to be an engineer and graduate from US because my teacher got a degree from US. You remove the ceiling from those students. So within 5 years from now, I have I don't want to say believe, I have a huge belief that this can be done. There will be a program that will enable educators around the world, anyone who can read and write, to be an educator, and he will be guided by technology, and he will be guided by community, real people around him, maybe not physically, to better teach and better educate.
And having asked the question, I have to answer it myself as well. And I'm going to step back from teaching to just thinking about adult upskilling and reskilling across the board, no matter what shoes you're wearing as an adult in your occupational role. And this world is so disruptive now, and it's changing so quickly that there's never going to be a finish line where we say, okay, now you're prepared and you can just go out and use what you've got, because the world of the students and the outcomes just shift underneath us. During the pandemic, I taught a course that went really well. I felt that it was maybe the best teaching of my life. And I thought, wow, I finally figured it out. Next year, this is going to be so cool. And next year I came in, and 2 weeks into the course, I said to myself, this isn't going so well. The world has changed. I cannot, use this model as if it was some magic formula. The world is different. The students are different. What they're looking for is different. So going back to what Rhonda said, having the confidence to say, I've learned what I can from formal education, and now I'm going to do self-directed learning the rest of my life. And every day I'm going to be capable of going out and increasing my capacity to do this or that. It requires a couple things. First, it requires what you said, Rhonda, which is a belief system in yourself. And if you've been historically marginalized, you may have been born with that belief system, but it's been undercut and damaged by other people telling you, well, you're not good enough for this, or you're not able to do that. And so recapturing, reinstilling that joy, as Amy said, and that belief in yourself is part of it. But the other is having kind of a rich ecosystem for informal learning that people can access. And I know, Amy, that you and your group are developing asynchronous kinds of experiences that teachers can access. And Rhonda, you've talked about the online game, and you've talked about teaching for grace. And Dr. Waleed, you talked about, how the digital school can become a model that really influences a lot of people's lives. And so I hope that we'll be 5 years farther along into developing that ecosystem and having people who are self-determined, who are not only using it, but also contributing to it and building it. And that would be a very bright future.
Our notions are weaving together. And I really underpinned, Rhonda, by what you said, which is our mindset that everyone can, that without diluting expectations, that we truly believe with the right training, which is what this is all about, that every human can. I just so appreciate that, and I'm doing this.
As I think we are approaching the last few minutes, I think any last thoughts from your side, Rhonda, Amy, before we do closing?
I think the one thing that I would just add is just the opportunities that we have right now, both digitally and unplugged, to use digital ideas without being plugged into a computer or a phone or a device, is unlimited and really provides an opportunity to really shape a new future where we can attain these goals of educating, the UN goals of educating everyone. And so I just hope that everyone collectively joins together to make this happen.
And just a key takeaway, I think, is training is needed at all levels of the teaching spectrum. And we're, in Dr. Waleed, in our project, we're teaching teachers who are trying to learn how to read in different languages, all the way to teachers who are growing as mentors and leaders. And so it's the amount of training that's needed to be able to solve for these big problems that the world is presenting is great. And so I take that as an exciting challenge, from basic digital literacy all the way, learning theory and advanced instructional strategies. It's just such a wide range of skill levels that need to be accommodated for. And this is an exciting time that we have advanced technologies to be able to do this, but we need the right people, the right talent involved in how to thoughtfully bring this training in a contextually relevant way to various geographies. And so excited that under the leadership of Dr. Waleed, we're able to see this being deployed to so many. I know it'll be tens of millions very, very soon to make such great impact. And so it's a very exciting time, and I'm thrilled that Arizona State University is a part of it.
Chris, any thoughts?
I just, every time I interact with people like Rhonda and Amy, I go away with more hope. So thank you for your leadership in this. And I think that we have many opportunities that I hope we realize.
Well, with endless opportunities and technology bringing much more opportunities and much more hope to the educators gap globally, I think I will close this episode. I would like to thank you all for your time, Amy, Rhonda, Chris, and I also would like to thank my colleagues who prepared and getting this episode prepared, Dr. Leslie, Dr. Fawzan, Hamdan, and to all the listeners or who are watching this episode, please share your thoughts, share your suggestions through the email that you will see on the screen. Thank you again, and see you soon in the next episode.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for making the time and joining us.